Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to an episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and today I'm joined by Katie. Katie, how are we?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. So today we are doing a Q&A. So these are questions that have been asked by the audience. So Katie, take it away.
Should we just go straight into it?
We're straight into it.
Cool. There is a really varied mix of questions here, pre-warning you.
Awesome, happy with that.
Okay, so first one is, how do you balance your career, personal life and self-care as a busy woman? Obviously, you're not a busy woman, but I think you can talk about it hypothetically, and I guess we can just replace woman for person.
So what was the three things? Career,
personal life, and self-care.
So for me, this all comes down to, I think a lot of people struggle with this anyway, like I said, whether it's male, female, like whatever it is, and whatever stage you're at in life, like balance. And I think we can get caught up too often trying to find balance. And there's this whole, I believe, fake notion of balance. And people are constantly trying to search out having everything balanced. I don't think that's how life works. I don't think you can ever get perfect balance, because if you look at the world and the things you're trying to control, they can never really be balanced because they're always changing. So for me, it's just looking at it and realizing, just accepting that things are never going to get balanced. And the analogy that I use with this is a Rubik's Cube analogy. So I don't actually have my Rubik's Cube with me, but you may have heard me talk about it before if you're a long-term listener of the podcast. But essentially with a Rubik's Cube, so there's 6 sides. So there's, let's just say potentially the 6 core things that people focus on in their life. So again, it could be, like I said, work, self-development, it could be health, fitness, whatever it is, all this sort of stuff. So the 6 sides of your Rubik's Cube, there's only ever going to be 3 sides that you can see at one time. You can never see all 6. So for me, there's only ever really 3 things you can fully give your time, energy and effort to. And if you look at the 3 things, there's only going to be one that's really the center focus. And then the other things, they're out of sight. It doesn't mean that you don't care about them. It just means that particular time, they aren't a priority. And the example I use with this is, let's say like your family is really important to you. Then you've got like work, the gym, healthcare, self-care, blah, blah, blah. But then a family member gets sick. That Rubik's Cube then shifts, and the only thing you're going to focus on, I'm talking about like seriously ill, the only thing you're going to focus on is that one part of the Rubik's Cube, that one square, and maybe slightly another one, which would be your work, because you're going to have to get some money coming in. But the rest of it goes out the window. You're not caring about going to the gym, you're not caring about anything else. You're focusing on this main family member. And for me, the Rubik's Cube analogy works on like an hour-to-hour basis, because when you're working, you're going to be focusing on work. But then for me, it's when you're not working, you've then got to shift the Rubik's Cube again and be like, right, this is then family time. So that then becomes your main focus. So you're not trying to find this perfect balance, because it's never going to be balanced. So if you're working, you're working. If you're with your family, you're with your family. And then it's then, to sort of touch on this, it's then where do you fit in the rest of the stuff? So it's not about finding balance. I don't think you can find balance, but it's just looking at me like, right, what are my priorities? So then it becomes a self-care thing. It's like, right, well, can you carve out some time during the week? Because again, if you've got kids, depending on what age they are, maybe go to bed at 7 o'clock. Depending on what job you have, you probably shouldn't be working past 7 o'clock at night, depending on what job you have. I understand there's, again, to use Mikey's favourite word, there's nuance to that. So if you're self-employed, like myself, you can work until 9, 10 o'clock at night if you need to. But for most people that work a 9 to 5 job, you don't need to be working past 7 o'clock at night. So maybe there you could carve in an hour for that self-care. And then people turn around and say, oh yeah, but that's when I watch my Netflix, or that's when I do this and that. Yes, but what's important to you is the self-care, the personal growth, the development, trying to figure out your triggers, especially if, again, using it, if the person's a parent. A lot of people want to show up to be a better parent. Okay, well, you can't do that until you're a better version of yourself. And if you're constantly tired all the time, okay, well, why are you tired all the time? So for me, people kind of get this balance wrong, because they're trying to be, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm watching Netflix. No, that's the time when the kids are in bed where you can carve out an hour, and then maybe you'll then figure out some stuff. You'll then feel better. You won't be drained of energy. So then you can show up as a better version of yourself. So you don't need that switch off. Because for me, a lot of it's escapism, especially if in the evening, if you turn into alcohol, your Netflix, whatever it is, that for me is escapism. And then I've been saying what you're escaping from, and then working on that. But to kind of go back to answer the question with the balance, I don't believe there's in such a thing as balance. I believe that you can manage your time effectively, so you can make time for all the things that you need to. But if you're working, you should be working. And it also comes down to seasons in your life as well, because if you're an entrepreneur or whatever, and you're trying to grow your own business, that's going to take priority. It has to. But if you're a new parent, your family's going to take priority. So for me, it's just understanding the certain seasons of your life. And I think this is also people struggle where if they have kids, for example, they then don't have as much time to maybe go to the gym as they did before. Okay, you've got to accept that. You're in a different season of your life. And again, when it comes to work, different seasons. If you're just starting out, you're going to have to spend more time, energy and effort on that. This is how it works to get it off the ground. But it's just realising that Rubik's Cube is always changing on an hour-to-hour basis. But you just have to look and say, are any of these 6 faces what I actually want? Or am I just filling my time with stuff? Which is then overwhelming me, meaning that I can't actually be present and I am not able to then add in the self-development stuff.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that for me is once you've worked out what you want to be doing and what's important to you, it's the whole time blocking thing that I know that you've spoken about before, that we both do. So for the week ahead, actually, what do I want to achieve this week? Obviously, your career or work, that's for most people at set times and that's blocked in. But outside of that, I think if you plan in advance and block that time in, like you say, for self-care, to go to the gym, to meet a friend for a coffee, and plan it all out so you know exactly when you're doing what you're doing when. Because I think people have more time than they think as well. Like I certainly was really guilty for thinking I've got no time in the mornings to do anything, when really I was faffing around for 2 hours between the hours of 6 and 8 a.m. But now that's really, I do things during that time to free up time to do other stuff at other times.
People are busy being busy.
Yeah.
They're busy being busy.
Favourite phrase.
And they're not actually being productive and moving their life forward. Like I said, they're busy doing things that aren't actually essential, and they're not prioritising stuff that is essential. So yeah, to your point, for me, the best thing to do is get Google Calendar on your phone. There's other calendars available, but Google Calendar's an easy one. I prefer it over like when I had an Apple one. Like it's better for everything. It goes over everything. It's fantastic. Basically, just saying what each week are the non-negotiables. So for example, if let's say you do have kids, okay, well, when do they have swimming club? When do they have this after school club? Whatever it is, cool. Then block that in your diary. Then block out your work week, work schedule. And on a day-to-day basis, just look at, well, what do I want to get done each day? So wake up each morning, what are my 3 things I want to get done today? And just block it in some time. Because for me, most people aren't intentional about their time. So for me, when you wake up, you've got 2 choices of your day. You can either be intentional or you can get distracted. And the problem is most people aren't intentional about where they want to go with their life. So then they're constantly distracted, doing stuff that isn't important, being busy. When actually if you're intentional and saying, actually, this is what I want to get done today. And you write down those 3 things. So it could be, for example, that you're going to email this one person about, I don't know, jet washing the patio. Okay, cool. Well, that moves your life forward. Tick. And then another one could be actually inquiring about a summer club for each kid. Bam, tick. And then another one could be I don't know, asking for a promotion or just doing something work-based. Those 3 things, right, today, I'm going to intentionally do these 3 actions, and that's going to then move your life forward. And that's just an extreme example. But another one could be that you're going to spend an hour with the self-care, or it could be you're going to read 10 pages of a book, or you're going to journal, or you're going to go out during your lunch break and try and get some fresh air. All those 3 things are things that you can be intentional about each day that allow you to move your life forward. And then that then becomes a compounding effect. So yeah, for me, the looking at your schedule, put the essential things in there. Even again with your partner, date night. So we've talked about this before. Saturday from 3 o'clock onwards, unless Villa are playing, then it becomes 5 o'clock. It's date night. So that's really important. And I was talking to a client the other day where he was talking about his wife and basically saying that through working with me, he's like, oh, I really want to prioritise spending more time. He realised he wasn't very present with his partner, his wife. And he said, once a month, we're going to go do something. And I basically sort of said to him, well, why don't you do it once a week? Because in his head, he thought that spending time with her meant you have to go to a spa and spend money and go to nice restaurants. I said, no, if you're just passing ships in the night, why not just have, when the kids go to bed on a Sunday, from 7 o'clock onwards or 8 o'clock onwards, just 2 hours where it's just you two, and you either have some food or you watch a movie or a TV show, but it's you two together present without phones. And he just was like, I'd never even thought about that. And I said, well, that's the thing. If you don't put it in your diary, it doesn't get done. And it's just about being intentional about, I want to spend time with my partner where I'm actually spending time with her rather than we're just living and existing in the same house. So again, people think that when it comes to like this date night, it has to be something lavish and spend loads of money. It doesn't at all. It's just be present. So that's just another example then with that Rubik's Cube, that at that moment in time, you're putting your partner, if you've got one, bam, there it is. That's the only thing that's facing. You're not worried about work. You're not worried about the kids. You're not worried about going to the gym. You're not worried about self-improvement. You're just spending time with your partner. So for me, it's just looking at that and being like, cool, what's important?
Yeah. And just to build on something that you just said there as well, is for me, I've got a lot going on. I've got a job, a business, a child, typical busy person, right? What I try to do, which really helped me, is kind of stack things at the same time. So I like to get my steps every day and I like to have fresh air, but I also like to learn. So what I try and do is put podcast on whilst I walk, 2 things at once instead of doing them side by side, where you can do them together, because then you kind of two for the price of one, isn't it?
Yep, perfect. Yeah, good.
Any more on that?
No, that's it.
Cool. Next.
I feel like I need to have some sort of like to read the questions. Can you only read them to me? I'm going to get.
Yeah, maybe I should give them you in advance.
Yeah. Anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
Just concentrate, right?
Concentrate. Yeah.
Okay. How do I build a strong support system to help me navigate life's challenges?
Depending on where you're at in your journey, again, this is a common question and a common thing I work on with clients because I think a lot of people struggle with this. You can't grow, this is my opinion, and again, can be wrong. I know it's a shock to a lot of people. Can be wrong.
It's not a shock.
You can't grow in the same environment that broke you. So when it comes to support network here, if you are trying to grow and develop and become a better version of yourself, you can't expect the same people that were in that old environment to support you moving forward because they don't understand. And actually what you'll find is that people that would potentially, again, not all the time, were the closest to you in that old environment and that old version of you, maybe the ones that you struggle to battle with the most as you start to grow on your journey, because they are essentially going to be losing their friend. They're going to be losing their drinking partner. They're going to be losing the crazy person that goes wild at parties. And that's not then you anymore. And what you do is when you step outside that tall poppy syndrome or crabs in a bucket analogy, as soon as you start to step out, you make other people uncomfortable. So they'll try and bring you down. So for me, the first thing to become aware of is that as you start to level up, as harsh and as savage as it sounds, most of the people in your friendship circle will disappear if you are actually intentional about going to where it is that you want to go. Because it's just like a plant pot. Like once you outgrow that soil in a plant pot, you then move it to a bigger plant pot so it can grow. You can't keep the same soil. Now, obviously, some bits of soil will stay, and they're the ones that are meant to stay. They're the people that actually do want to support you grow, support you and watch you grow, but a lot of people won't. And when you get, I talk about this all the time with clients because it's bizarre and people don't ever talk about this, and it's a big common problem when it comes to self-development journey, is that when you start to step out of that, for lack of a better word, swamp, like all the negativity, because it can be negative. Again, I'm using this as an extreme example, and I'm talking about people that are really struggling mentally. Like that environment is not good. It's a toxic, swampy environment. That's how I like to use that analogy. When you're stepping out of that, you're going to be lonely. And you're going to be lonely because you don't have that support network of people that you thought you had. And also, as you're stepping out, you may get some negative comments from those people. And that's okay and that's normal. People don't talk about this. People don't talk about it's okay to be lonely for a little bit. But then here's the thing. This is where you don't then become a recluse and isolate yourself while you're still working on growing and developing yourself. As you're intentional about doing that, you will then attract people into your life that are on the same journey as you naturally, but you have to go out and seek that. And I'm not saying you go to clubs or anything like that, like social events or anything like that. I'm just saying you just go out and live your day-to-day life, because what happens is you have an interaction at the shop. So you go to like the big local supermarket and you just happen to just interact with someone because you're in better headspace. You will just interact with someone, and then before you know it, you're talking and like, I can't get on with this person. Or when you're taking the kids to school, you'll talk to one of the other mums, and whatever it is, like, or going to the gym, just something. You'll start to interact with people on a different level because, again, going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, like vibrational frequencies, like you get attracted to people on the same vibrational frequency as you. And this is also why when you start to do that self-development journey, you won't relate to the same people in that swamp as you did before. You will start to look at them differently. And here's another key point to this. Don't judge them because you were once them. This is like we spoke about this on the podcast with Bianca, where when you stop drinking, you can then start to judge people for drinking. Well, you were once them. You want someone that drank. I was once someone that drank. So I don't look at people that drink as like some sort of scum of the earth. Like, no, I used to be that. So you've got to respect everyone's journey. But then what happens is you will then start to relate more with other people who actually value, I don't know, going for a nice coffee on a Sunday morning or going for walks or self-care, self-improvement, whatever it is. But you have to go for that uncomfortableness of being alone. But it's realizing that you're not alone. You are rebuilding that relationship with yourself and that new version of you. And just like with any good relationship, you have to nurture and go through the good and the bad times. And part of the bad times is just being alone. So part of that is going to feel lonely. You are going to feel a bit isolated, but just realize that is part of the journey. And that's what no one talks about. And this is where people then go back into that old environment. You see this all the time when people go on like, it's the exactly same thing here as when people go on retreats for drugs and alcohol. So they go to like into clinics, rehab, and then they come out of that. So that's a completely new environment. They've got out of the swamp, the toxic environment that got them addicted. They become clean, and they go straight back into their old environment. And 9 times out of 10, they'll go back to how they were. So it's just realizing that when you come out of that phase, again, it's going to be lonely. You're isolated in that sort of recovery, like the rehab, which is essentially what you're doing is you're stepping out. But then you then have to step out into another environment. You can't go back into the same environment. However, just like with the rehab, some of your friends and family members will be very, very supportive. So you take them along the journey with you. So you're not cutting everyone out. You're just realizing that a lot of these people here will not serve you, and that's okay.
So that time and space in the middle before you find your new people can be quite lonely. And it can be hard to not go back. Mm-hmm. So what kind of advice would you give to people to be able to continue going forward at that time in the middle where it can be really hard?
You need to know where you want to go. So for me, people do things for one or two reasons: to either avoid something, to move away from something, or to move towards something. So you have to remind yourself, what are you moving away from? So you remind yourself, I'm moving away from this old group, this old environment, this old toxicity because of X, Y, and Z. And then you've got to create a compelling future. This is what I want my life to look like. And then you remind yourself of that future. So when you're stuck there in the middle, you're reminding yourself, I'm doing this because I'm moving away from X and towards Y. So you're leveraging both things. You're leveraging the negativity that you're moving away from, and also the positive of, I'm moving towards this compelling future. And this is why it's important when you go on this journey. What is it you want your life to look like? I'm not saying you've got to have it down to a T of you want this kind of dog breed at this age and like you want to have this many kids and this. I'm not talking about the craziness like that. I'm talking about like just what do you want your life to kind of look like? What kind of peace do you want each day? Like even when it comes down to your job, what kind of job do you want? Because that's important, because we spend most of our time working. So if you don't enjoy your job, then that's going to cause a lot of negativity mentally. So what kind of job do you want? And if you're not sure, okay, well, do you want to work a 9 to 5? No. Okay, so you want a job with more flexible hours. Okay, do you want to work in an office? No. Okay, well, maybe do you want to work outside? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, do you want to work from home? Okay, bam. So you start to just have these conversations with yourself, and you start to create this future. And then what happens is, because you're creating this future, you start to think differently. When you start to think differently, you start to feel differently. When you start to feel differently, energetically, your body changes and it shifts. And as I mentioned before, that's when you start to attract these things into your life. It sounds a bit like namby-pamby, but again, like quantum physics backs this stuff up. Like it's scientifically backed up now with a lot of this stuff of like actually what we actually attract comes back into us. So it's not this whole like hippy-dippy law of attraction stuff that's not real. Like it genuinely is. Like it's started to be backed up by science now, which is quite cool. But it's not just sat there thinking about it. You have to actually go and take action. You have to step into that version of you. And it's what I talk about all the time is that B times do equals have. If you want to have a better future, if you want to have a better life, you first have to become that person. And how do you become that person? You start to think like that person. You start to think differently. When you think differently, you feel differently, you're becoming a different person. And then when you become that different person, you do different things. So when you become a different person, you do different things, you have that result. B times do equals have. And you step through that process and it will change your life.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. Well, it's attached to my thing, so I can't actually drop it.
No, please don't drop it. No, that's it. Next question.
Next question, yeah.
This is a really interesting one. What's the most impactful book you've read on personal self-development and why?
Great question. I've got so many. A lot of these old books you see behind. So someone said to me, I was actually quite offended. I can't remember who said it to me, why or when or where. So if you're listening, my apologies. Someone knows really itchy. That someone thought that his background was fake.
What, like a Zoom thing?
Like a Zoom thing. And I was like, no, this is a real brick background. And these books are real. And some of these books are very expensive.
That's my top class interior design skills.
These books are very expensive. So there's a whole host of books I've read, like genuinely loads of books I've read. But for like the most impactful book, it's the one that I recommend all my clients read. It's called The Art of Being Brilliant. So I think I'll put it in the show notes. I did a whole thing about what I learned from The Art of Being Brilliant. But for me, I read that book originally. So it was gifted to me by a girlfriend when I was 22, 23 years old. And she was a teacher. And it's by Dr. Andy Cope. And he does a lot of stuff in schools. So that's how she'd heard about him. And I read the book. It was absolutely fantastic. It's a really, really easy book to read. So even when I'm working with kids, in like the special group I'm working with them in year 11s, I will gift them the book sometimes as well because it's a really easy book to read. Like super easy. The language is fantastic. And that's what I like about it. It's so simple. Yet some of the concepts that are in there are so deep. And I now have read it 15, 16 times probably. And the audiobook is fantastic. So for those people that like to listen to audiobooks, the audiobook is fantastic. And every single time I read that book, I learn something new. And again, I get that you get that with most books. I understand that. But for a book that's so simple that I can still now, with everything that I know, go there and learn something new, that for me is hands down the best book. And it's one of those books where I would go back and read it. There's some exercises in there, do the exercises, do the activities. And it's one of those books for me that once you've read it, pass it on to somebody else. It's one of those kind of books. Like just read it, learn from it, and move on. But that for me is most impactful because it's so simple. Because there's loads of other books I've read that are really advanced and there's really big concepts and you have to really sit and think about what they're trying to say to me. So that's the first book. The second book I then say is The Untethered Soul. Once again, that's a bit of a deep book to start with, but depending on where you're at in your journey, if you've been doing self-development for a bit of a while, The Untethered Soul is a book that I definitely would recommend. But I'd always start with The Art of Being Brilliant. And to be fair, the order that I'd normally recommend it going for clients is The Art of Being Brilliant, Good Vibes, Good Life by Vex King, and then The Untethered Soul. So they're the 3 books I recommend in that order. But again, depending on where you're at in your journey, you can maybe start with The Untethered Soul. But I would always just read The Art of Being Brilliant anyway. Just such a really good key reminder of some real basic key principles. So yeah, that's the book for me. But again, this is where how I read now has changed a bit because, and again, I think a lot of people listening to this will relate to this because I used to be a guy that used to pride himself on I've read 100 books in a year, which is a massive thing for dyslexic Dan. However, if you ask me now, what have I learned from those books? I can't tell you. Now, I'm sure that if I got pushed, some knowledge will come out that I'm saying on podcasts or when I'm with clients that I learned from one of those books, but I can't tell you. So the thing for me is when I read The Art of Being Brilliant, I read it at least 3 times before I became depressed. However, I read it now and all the information in there would have helped me not be depressed had I actually applied what was in the book. So the question for me isn't what's the best book or what books do I recommend. The question is, how do you actually read? And for me, it's not reading to acquire knowledge, it's reading to understand. So what I now do is I take more time to read, I actually highlight, and then I write notes on what it is that I'm reading, because then it's getting me to think about what I'm thinking about. So then I can retain a lot more of the information. So a lot of the books I read now, so the previous book I read is by a Jewish rabbi, I can retain a lot of the information. Not all of it, but the key bits. Obviously, the whole book, the key golden nuggets that I have taken, I can recall. So there's one about, the analogy that he uses about the mind. And he talks about the rider and the horse. So for a lot of people, so you've got the horse is the emotions and the mind is the rider. And basically says a lot of the time, people are riding a wild horse and the horse, their emotions are just riding all over the shop. But actually, you need to regain control. So you need to consciously regain control of your emotions, just like a rider would with a horse, and just regain control of it. So again, that's something that stood out straight away, bam. And there's all of the little bits that he said where I can just kind of recall them. So for me, it's not about what book you read. It's about what is the purpose of you reading that book. Because if you're just reading to gain more knowledge, that isn't going to get you anywhere. Because I can categorically guarantee you, whoever's listening to this, that you already have all the knowledge to improve your life by 1, 2, 3, 4%. The problem is you're not. Because there's a difference between knowing and doing. Knowing is conscious, doing is subconscious. And the subconscious is harder to reprogram. So for me, it's about doing more with the stuff you know, not trying to find more things to know. It's about looking at what are the things that are holding you back and stopping you from doing the stuff that you already know. Kind of long-winded answer to that question, but it was a great question. Is there anything else to do on that? Could I cover that?
No.
Cool.
Next question. Do you have any practical techniques or tips for managing stress and anxiety in daily life?
Find out what it is that's causing you to be stressed and anxious. Because a lot of the time, we do it to ourselves. We do all of them to ourselves. So we do stress, we do anxiety, like we do it to ourselves, and it's what people don't like. Now again, there's a difference between like a chemical imbalance that's causing people to be anxious, get that. But a lot of the time we are doing it to ourselves. Most of the time we're doing it to ourselves. We do anxiety in a certain way. And again, it comes down to thinking patterns. So literally just what I said that last question about the horse and the rider. For most people, the horse is leading the rider. The horse is going wild and we're just letting it run wild. And that's what's causing us stress and that's what's causing us anxiety. Because what's anxiety? Anxiety is our thought pattern going out of control for the negative what ifs. We've created a story in our head about things that we cannot control and then we're getting anxious about that. Because anxiety is just feeling anxious out of control. Because being anxious is not a problem. If you're walking down a dark alleyway at night time, you want to feel anxious. You want to feel heightened. You want to feel, oh, I don't know what's going on here. I need to be alert. That is very healthy. When that becomes chronic and out of control, that's anxiety. They're two very different things. Feeling anxious is not a problem. Anxiety is, and if you're causing yourself to have anxiety, realize you're doing it to yourself. So you have to take it back and be like, what is causing me to feel this anxiety? What am I thinking about? What am I worrying about? What is the problem? What is the issue? And a lot of the time, it's just the unknown. It's the what ifs. and we're playing stories in our head, creating worst case scenarios, and then we're getting anxious about taking a step in case we fall into this narrative, this story that we've created that isn't true. And a lot of the time that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we're anxious about something not working out the way we want it to, or things failing, going wrong. We're then feeling so anxious that we don't actually show up to that event as that best version of ourselves. So then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that we do fail, that we're not very good, because we haven't actually gone in there as the best version of ourselves. So the first thing for me is just to, when you're feeling anxious or stressed, just ask yourself, what is the root cause of this? And for me, I love to do mind maps. So what I'll do is just write down the word stressed or anxious or anxiety or whatever, draw a circle around it, set a timer on your phone, and just write down every association you have with that anxiety or that stressor, both positive and negative. And by the end of it, you'll see what's there, like what is it? And you can start to really hone in on the core essence of why you're feeling stressed or why you're feeling anxious. And especially if it's stress, if it's an external thing, stress is a very umbrella term. So it's then using something like an emotion wheel. So again, you can type in Google emotion wheel and really get to the essence of, well, what is that stress? And again, because stress and anxiety are very similar. And it could be that you're feeling overwhelmed. So you're not stressed, you're not anxious, you're feeling overwhelmed.
That's really common as well.
Exactly. So why are you feeling overwhelmed? What is causing you to feel overwhelmed? What need of yours is not being met that's leading you to feel overwhelmed? Because one of your needs could be safety and it could be control. So you don't feel in control and you don't feel safe, which is leading you to feel overwhelmed, which is then causing your anxiety. So you've got to go back to, how can I get my need met? How can I feel more in control? And here's the kicker. The only thing you can control is yourself, is your thoughts and the actions that you take. So once you start to go inwards and start to recalibrate your thoughts, start to call out all the BS thoughts that you're having, start to actually regain control like the rider on the horse, you grab the reins and you say, no, I'm in control. You start to question these thoughts. The thought of anxiety, that anxious thought comes in, these thoughts, question, where's that come from? Why am I feeling this? Do I need to be thinking about this now? What other thing am I thinking about that would serve me? You then, as the rider, are grabbing the reins tightly and you're then taking control of your emotions. You're starting to steady the ship, because most people don't realise they can start to question their thoughts. They can start to unpick their thoughts. Thoughts are not reality. Thoughts are just thoughts. They come and go. We are the only one that gives them the power, because a thought is neither positive nor negative. It is just a thought. It is neutral. It's our attachment to it that causes the issue. So when you start to notice that overwhelmed feeling, what are you thinking about? And start to question, and then start to think about other things, start to reprogram that. Does that make sense? I can't went for a massive tangent there. I can't remember, again, do this quite regularly. I can't remember what the question was. Anxiety and stress.
No, that's good.
Let's make this the last one, the last question.
Pardon?
Let's make this last question.
Okay.
Just keep it nice and short and sharp. So already we're on 30 minutes at the minute.
Okay.
So I think we get a nice...
this is a really nice question to end on.
Awesome.
What have you been grateful for in your life recently?
Oh, love that. Opportunities. Because I thought it would be like I did this in my journal this morning, actually. I just did a few things I was grateful for. My journal's over there. I was going to actually read out the things I was grateful for. Opportunities is a big one. And I'm also grateful for knowledge. Because I'm showing up differently, opportunities are presenting themselves. And a lot of the information I've had access to, I'm taking a little bit more seriously now. And then another thing to this is obviously that hockey stuff, the opportunities with the hockey. So for those of you who don't know, if anyone listens to me on the BBC local radio on Wednesdays, I've been called Ted Lasso recently, because I've basically been helping coach Katie's hockey team. And in the last game of the season, they had to not lose. So if they drew or won, they would stay up. But if they lost, they'd get relegated, because it was between them and the team they were playing. And they ended up winning 5-0. But at halftime, it was 0-0, and it was a very, very close game. And for me, I've been basically coaching a team for more than half the season. And that for me was a massive stepping out of your comfort zone, learning something new, and also building really good relationships with people and honing my skills in a sports kind of setting. Because obviously, it's really easy to motivate and inspire when people are paying you money for it, because they're paying money, they want that. When you've got a group of people that aren't necessarily open to it, but then they become open to it and they are really receptive to the information you're saying, and you get that positive feedback, that was something I've been really grateful for. And obviously, when we went after the meal, that's why I ended up paying. Because I paid because I just want to say thank you, because to be accepted by that group of people was amazing. So yeah, there are a few things. But for me, yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for at the minute. And I think that sometimes when it goes back to that stress and anxiety, sort of linking this in, you can't think of a positive and negative at the same time. So whenever you are starting to feel stressed or anxious, I would always go to gratitude first. and just think of things that you're grateful for. And that for me is something I do on a regular basis. Is if I am feeling a certain way, I'll just be like, well, what am I grateful for? And again, there's so much in your life right now, no matter, because again, listening to this, I've probably got no idea who you are listening to this, but I guarantee you there's things in your life that you've got to be grateful for, or there's things for you to be grateful for. Even listening to this, the ability you've got a phone or a laptop to listen to this, the fact you've got good hearing to listen to this. If you're watching this on YouTube, again, you've got sight, you can see this. There's so many things to be grateful for, and it sounds really, really stupid, but the little things become the big things. And the way the universe works is, and the reticular activating system, so the reticular activating system is the filter in your brain that basically shows you things that are important to you. The more you start to reprogram the brain for gratitude, it will show you more things to be grateful for. And those opportunities have always been there, but you start to become more aware of them because you're focused on it and you're telling the brain, this is important to me. So yeah, I feel that answered that question again. Yeah, awesome. What were you got to be grateful for?
What have I got to be grateful for? You really spun it on me now, haven't I? I think for me, to your point, is opportunities. I think when you change the way that you look at the world, like you say, more opportunities come to you. So I stopped playing hockey, like retired, quote unquote. But then once I was in a, I guess, better headspace and with encouragement from you, I went back to play hockey this year, and I've literally had the best year I've ever had playing hockey. So I'm super grateful for that, with, like you say, a really good bunch of girls. And just kind of everything in life feels good at the moment. So kind of business is going well, like we're doing some cool stuff, and you can never have balance, but I'm happy with the equilibrium of my life right now.
Good word.
Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Right. Thank you very much. Don't forget, if you've got any questions at all, again, if you're on YouTube, you can pop them in the comments. And again, if you took any value from today's episode, don't forget to like and share with a friend. Until next time, take it easy.